and get started. We always have people roll in, especially Friday morning. Everyone's trying to wrap up before the weekend. But thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar with Pixo, Web Accessibility 101. Before I hand it over to their team, just a quick few things. You are welcome to ask questions. Just drop those in the chat box and we'll either answer them following the presentation, or their team may drop some information in the chat as well. And you'll also receive the recording of today's session so you can go back and revisit any information. So if you feel like you missed something, it's okay. We will provide you with that after the fact. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to the Pixo team and we can get started.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I'm Danielle Hendricks. I am the head of sales with Pixo. And just to kick us off, if you haven't heard of Pixo, I was just going to give you a little bit of background. We are a software consultancy that's located in the heart of Urbana. We are woman-owned, and we create custom websites, software, and applications that address businesses' unique needs. And I'm really happy to help connect what our knowledge base is with small businesses through this program. So if there's other things that come up you think of that Pixo could help with, we always love to know what those ideas are. I'm just going to help facilitate today, so you won't hear me talking too much, but if you do have questions or want to follow up, you can reach out to me directly. We can point you in the right direction. Next up, I'm going to have Jenna introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I also work at Pixo. I'm the lead account coordinator here, so I'm on the sales team as well. I'm going to be sharing some helpful information in the chat, as Landi's going to be sharing a lot of information today, and I'll be pointing you to those resources as she talks about them so that you can have those as takeaways. And as everyone has mentioned, if you have questions, please post those in the chat. Jordan and I will keep an eye on them and make sure that Landi gets to them. And yes, if you have questions afterwards, you're welcome to reach out to any of us, and we will be sharing some follow-up materials. Is that right, Jordan? Are we able to send follow-up materials to participants afterwards?
Yes, of course. If you have something you want me to include, just send it my way. I'll make sure you guys are all in the follow-up email as well.
Perfect. We'll share those resources that I share throughout the presentation in that follow-up.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. And to get started today on our topic of Accessibility 101, I'm going to turn over to Landi Najarro, our lead software engineer, to introduce herself and to also share her wisdom and passion about this topic. I'm so excited for y'all to hear. Take it away, Landi.
Hi, my name is Landi Najarro. I've been at Pixo for 10 and a half years now. I wanted to share a little bit about what is web accessibility and why does it matter. It's the art of providing equal access and equal opportunity for web content to people with disabilities. And the reason that this is important to me is it's been close to my heart since I was little. In 5th grade, I read an ASL book. It taught the ASL alphabet, and I was like, wow, what a cool way to communicate. And when I was a teenager, I taught children with disabilities martial arts. They're between the age like 3.5 to about 12. And then when I was in college, I took 1 year of ASL. And then a few years, after I graduated from college, I had my first son, who is autistic, and he was nonverbal until he was about 3 years and 4 months old. And he used an AAC device, which stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication Device, and we call it his talker. So he's used that to communicate for a really long time. He's slowly acquiring speech, so he's using his voice more and more. But I've always been connected to various marginalized groups and fought for equity for them. So it's important to me now, more than ever, that my son get the same opportunities and experiences as his peers. And I want to spread awareness of what some of the boundaries are that get in the way of that. And technology is a big one. So what we're going to cover today is Web Accessibility 101. I'm going to talk about types of disabilities, assistive technology, compliance principles, tips and tools, and testing. So the goal of this is to make your site as accessible as possible to create an equitable experience for all users, regardless of their ability. So I'm going to move this guy back out of the way. I did include a small video of my son using his talker because he was about 2.5. So he started really early, but this is an example of him listening to me and navigating through his talker, and it just makes me so happy. So here we go.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Go to category. Animals, farm animals, and horse.
Horse.
Good job, Michael.
He was so proud of himself. So, oops.
Okay.
All right. So, there are 1 billion people that have a disability on our planet today. That's 15% or 1 in 7 that we know of. People with disabilities are by far the largest marginalized group on the web. There are many diverse types of disabilities, and not all of them are visible or physical. So this number is also based on people reporting their disabilities, so it's most likely an underestimate. Here's an example of a bunch of different types of disabilities, but it's not an exhaustive list. When people think of web accessibility, they think of blind users, but there are many other types of disabilities that we need to consider when thinking about accessibility, which means that we also don't just test one way. Of course, there's screen readers that blind users would use, but there are other people who cannot operate a mouse, or people who cannot see small text, or people that can't differentiate between colors. So when we build an accessible website, we're building it for people with disabilities. Yeah, that's true. But making your site accessible also improves the overall user experience for your site for all users. So it really is for everyone. And one thing we fail to realize is that we take our abilities for granted. Any one of us can become a part of the disability community at any time. Sometimes it's situational, sometimes it's permanent, but it's a powerful thing to be able to put yourself in another's shoes and see how difficult it is. So, situational challenges. A permanent injury would be one arm, or a permanent disability would be having one arm. An injury would be temporary, and a new parent is also situational. Here are some other examples of situational challenges. You could have a broken mouse, fractured wrists, you're using a mobile device and there's glare on the screen, you're tired, your environment's noisy, you've had a long, stressful day. So by designing for a person with a permanent disability, a person with a situational disability will also benefit. So for example, if you make sure your website is keyboard accessible, then someone who uses assistive technology will also be able to navigate your website. It can also benefit a user whose mouse is broken, and now they have to only use the keyboard to navigate. So this is why interaction shouldn't just be on hover, but also like on focus. That's a more technical example. How many people actually benefit from accessibility or from inclusive design? So some people are hesitant to address accessibility concerns because it only affects so many users. Anybody's ever heard that before? I've heard stuff like that similarly in the past. But if you look, somebody with a permanent arm injury, that's 26,000. Temporarily injured, that number jumps to 13 million. And then situationally, a new parent, that's another 8 million. So if you think about all the different spectrums of types of abilities, that jumped from 26,000 to over 20 million. Also keep in mind what could happen if you don't make your site with accessibility in mind. People with disabilities in your target audience may be unable to interact with the elements on your site, or they may miss important information. You may miss opportunities to connect with a large number of people, which can be really important. People who you are unable to reach will look somewhere else to get their needs met. You could also have legal ramifications if you work in an industry that must comply with Section 508 accessibility requirements. That's in like higher ed, government, etc. So I want to go into a little bit more about assistive technology. Assistive technology in a web context is assistive, adaptive, or rehabilitative devices that help people with disabilities navigate the web. I'm going to show you 3 examples of different types of assistive technology, but there's a lot more that we won't cover. But know that most assistive technology will look like a keyboard to your computer, which is another reason that testing for keyboard only would be a good indicator of how well other technologies will be able to access your web content. This one is a user with high contrast color-coded keyboard to make finding the keys that they need easier. This would be an example of a user with limited vision. This one is a sip and puff device called SNP. It uses air pressure controls. So they can use a puff of air to navigate to each element on your website, and they can use a sip of air to activate a link or a button. This would be an example of a user with limited mobility in their arms. This is a keyboard with a Braille input. So the pins at the bottom will raise and fall whenever users over a line of text on your website so they can read that text in Braille. They can type on the regular keyboard, but if they're more efficient reading in Braille, this would help them do that quickly. Okay. ADA 508 and WCAG. Oh my. So if you've heard of any of these terms, it might be confusing. What means what? What does compliance actually mean? So I want to demystify that a little bit. ADA stands for Americans with Disability Acts, and it's a civil rights law prohibiting discrimination against people with disabilities that requires accessibility in all areas of your business. So physical spaces, hiring, and the digital space. It was passed in 1990. Section 508 is a federal law that requires federal agencies to use information and tech that people with disabilities can access. That requires WCAG 2.0 AA compliance. Actually, WCAG 2.1 is now live, and I believe they're already working on 2.2. And what is WCAG? WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Sometimes you'll see accessibility written as A11Y, and that's because there's 11 letters between the A and the Y in the word accessibility. WCAG is an internationally recognized standard for digital accessibility that was launched in 2008. It can be used to work toward Section 508 or ADA compliance. So WCAG has strictness levels. They have A, which is the least strict, AA, which is the most common that sites are tested against, and AAA, which is the strictest. But we do not require AAA all the time because it's not possible to satisfy all the AAA success criteria for some content. For example, if you had a scientific journal article, you wouldn't be able to satisfy the AAA requirement of an 8th grade reading level for your content. Another physical example would be if you had a building and some of them cannot accommodate a ramp, then you would not be able to reach that AAA level. But as long as one of your entrances has a ramp, then you're good to go. So technical standard for web accessibility. Looking further at WCAG, we can see that there are 4 principles broken into 13 guidelines and 78 success criteria. So if we look even further, 30 of those are level A, 20 are AA, and 28 are AAA. Understanding WCAG can get very complex, especially when we get into those 78 success criteria. So we're going to look at the 4 principles instead and get an idea of what's required for an equitable user experience. So the first is perceivable. Information and user interface components must be presented to users in ways they can perceive. This means that the users must be able to perceive the information being presented. It can't be invisible to all of their senses. So if the information was purely visual, then someone with a visual disability won't be able to perceive that unless there was an alternative method of presentation. Operable. User interface components and navigation must be operable. This means that a user must be able to operate the interface. The interface cannot require an action that a user cannot perform. I think a lot about drag and drop with this example. Only someone with motor abilities, high functioning motor abilities, can perform drag and drop, and they would need a mouse in order to do that. So you'd have to provide an alternative method to interact with that piece of your site that was not drag and drop. That would be keyboard only. Understandable. So this relates to that 8th grade reading level that I mentioned earlier. Information and the operation of the user interface must be understandable. This means that users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. The content or operation cannot be beyond their understanding. I also think about CAPTCHAs. If you've had a form, you've had a CAPTCHA that's like, okay, what's 2 + 5? Usually that's like a parental lock CAPTCHA, right? We think most adults are able to do the calculation 2 + 5. But if you're asking people to solve quadratic equations to get to your content, even if they can, they probably won't want to do it. And robust. Content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. So this means that users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. So user agents could be your browser, it could be the type of device that you're using. We just need to make sure that your website is compatible with all of that. So that's a lot, but how do we actually make that happen? There's a lot to consider when building an accessible website, but a good start would be to put yourself in the shoes of people with various disabilities and make small changes within reasoning related to that. So where do you start? I'm going to cover 3 major areas of disabilities. One is motor disability. Imagine that you can only use your voice to control the computer. You can move your arm well, but not your fingers. You use a joystick or another adaptive input device as a mouse. You have no control of your arms or hands. You use an SMP device to control a computer with a stick. The next category is cognitive disabilities. So imagine that you have trouble with memorization, correct spelling, performance of calculations, solving puzzles. Then we have visual disabilities. Imagine that you can't tell certain colors apart. They just look the same. Can read, but only at 400% magnification. Can't read or can't read comfortably, so you use a screen reader instead. There's a lot to consider when building an accessible website. And if you think about these 3 major categories, you're covering a lot of bases. So ask yourself these questions and then ask, does your site accommodate these scenarios? And then you'd want to do that early and often as you're developing new features. Okay, tools and testing. So in these same 3 categories, what are some things that we can do to see if your website does accommodate these things? For motor, using only your keyboard, check that you can access and interact all elements on your website. If the keyboard can access it, so can many other types of assistive technology. Another good thing to do would be test on mobile devices. Sometimes elements are too small on mobile devices that even users without disabilities have trouble interacting with them properly. I think about like the X button on ads when you want to close them. Then we have cognitive disabilities. So use a readability analyzer like this one to make sure that your content is understandable. That's also related to that 8th grade reading level. You'll see there's this Flesch reading ease and Flesch Kincaid grade level. So it needs to be below 8. You should also make sure that you don't have auto advancing carousels. A lot of people really like to have these big carousels on their home pages or other landing pages that show a variety of content. You can have that, but make sure that there's a way to pause or play for users who do not like motion, or for users that need extra time to read the content. And make sure that you allow 3 seconds per word before the content changes. That sounds like a lot, and it is, but that's to accommodate various reading levels and reading speeds. Then we have visual. So you could use a color contrast checker to make sure that users with limited vision can see enough difference between your background and foreground colors. You could use a color blindness checker like this one, which is really cool, to see what different users with different type of color blindnesses would see. So I like this because you can choose, hey, what kind of color blindness do I want to see, and see what those color combinations look like together there. And then you could also use a screen reader like this one. This is VoiceOver for Mac, to hear how a blind person would experience your website. So I mentioned before, putting yourself in other people's shoes. How exactly do you do that? You've seen these pictures already a few times in this presentation. This is from Microsoft's Inclusive Design Toolkit. They have a lot of good resources and exercises for getting yourself into that empathic state. So one example of such an exercise is their content and capability match one. This is an example. The category is touch. Here's the permanent, temporary, and situational version of touch. And these are all different cards that they use in their exercises. So you have see, hear, speak, etc. This is for more than just web content, their inclusive design toolkit, but a lot of this could be applicable to your website. So here's the context and capability match. I really, really love this. You would see when a person's environment changes, what could change about their capabilities. So the instructions, from a physical or social context cards, choose one, and then you have to choose a temporary or situational limitation card. How well will your website adapt to that combination? List the modifications you would make to adapt your solution. Revise your scenario to include how it responds. Repeat with other combinations. This is a really good way to put yourself in that user's shoes and to try to imagine what they might come up against that's a blocker for having a good experience. Well, what if you need more help than that? What if putting yourself in someone else's shoes isn't quite enough and you need more technical help? You have ideas of what you want to do, but you're not sure how to achieve it. Accessibility isn't easy, especially if you're thinking about it after your site is already built. It's harder to make changes after the fact than to bake it into the initial build. So we're going to talk about if you're starting a brand new site, how do you have accessibility in mind? And one way is to design for mobile first. So some benefits of doing mobile first is you decide the importance of the content. On a little tiny screen, you don't see the entire website. So the most important content has to be at the top, followed by supporting content underneath, and etc. You could also design for desktop first, and then you will use what we call landmarks to decide what the most important content would be. And then you just have to make sure that as the screen shrinks, your content floats and responds in the correct way. Also, another good thing is determining the smallest font size that you could use and the colors that you want to use would be useful, because you can see if it works at a really, really small screen, it's also going to work for a large screen. I wanted to clarify that a lot of people design, when they're doing design for print, they use point, not pixels. They are not the same. The WCAG guidelines are in pixels. So it says that large text is 14 pixels, or actually 14 point and bold, or 16 point. I believe 14 point is something like 18 pixels. So you have to keep that in mind. Like when you're translating your design and actually building it out, what is the smallest font that I can use with this color combination to make sure that there's enough contrast? So landmarks, I've said this like 30 times now. What is a landmark? Well, in the physical world, we know that landmarks help us orient to where we are in a city. An ARIA landmark is the same, and it helps you orient to where you are on a page. And this is for users with assistive technology. So when you define parts of your page with these ARIA landmarks, it allows screen readers the ability to easily jump from one section of your site to another and to know where they're at and where they're going. Here's a bunch of defined ARIA landmarks. We have banner, navigation, main, content info, complementary, search, form, and application. These three, banner, main, and content info, are required on every page, and there must be only one on that page. If you've ever seen HTML written before, we have HTML tags, which are the little angle brackets with like a word inside of it. So an example of a tag would be a div, div, or an h1 tag. If you've seen a bunch of HTML and all you see is divs all over the place, that's probably legacy HTML. With HTML5, they introduce many new elements that also are similar to those ARIA attributes that we're looking for. So the great thing about HTML5 is semantic. Those tags actually have meaning, and it's easier to know where should I use this. So whenever possible, go with HTML5 and semantics, but sometimes that's not possible because they're not one-to-one. And so in that case, you would use a div or a different HTML sectioning element, and you would add one of these ARIA landmarks to it. So it is not one-to-one, but for a lot of it, it is. Role equals banner matches the header. Role equals navigation matches the nav tag. Main is main. Content info is the footer. And then region and article are not ARIA landmarks, but they do have corresponding HTML5 for it. And then search, notice search does not have any HTML5 that's related to it. So I would put that in a button or a div, and I would add ARIA role equals search. So how do you know which HTML5 tag or ARIA role to use? You can just ask yourself some questions that can help guide you to that answer. So can it stand alone by its own? Does it need to be seen in context of the rest of the site for it to make sense? If it can be on its own, then article would be good. Oops. Is it a list of links to get from one place to another on your website? If so, then it's probably navigation. Is it required to understand the main content? If not, then it's probably a side. It's complementary, it's extra. So, etc. That's how you would figure that out. So there are two big pieces of accessibility, and one is structure. So things like semantic HTML, and the other is interactivity. So I'm going to show you another example of figuring out how a user interacts with your site. This is a really simplified flowchart to show that, hey, blue is spacebar, green is enter, purple is arrow keys, and yellow is tab. If a user gets to a skip to link on your website, they're expecting to hit the enter button to go to whichever item that they hear that they want to go to. If they're using a navigation, they're expecting the arrow keys to move them from one item to the next item, and they're expecting to hit enter or spacebar to open a child navigation or to go to that navigation item. So keep in mind that keyboard only and screen readers have separate shortcuts, and different operating systems will also have different shortcuts. So it really depends on which screen reader you're using. So I'm not showing any other keys other than these basic ones that you'll see across multiple browsers. So yeah, that's roles and interactivity. Tools and testing. This is one of my favorite parts. If you already have a website and you need to see if it's compliant, you can use a variety of tools to see what accessibility issues might exist. I'm going to go through some of the tools that we use here at Pixo. This one is called FAE, stands for Functional Accessibility Evaluator. I believe they might be on 2.1 now. It's a crawler. And what that means is you input one URL, and then this tool will crawl through your website and grab all the other URLs that it can see related to your website and test all of those pages automatically. So what's good about this is it breaks down everything that it finds into a rule group or category. And it'll tell you whether it's a violation, which is the V, a warning, something that you have to test manually, so manual check, or a pass, or if it's not applicable. So if you didn't have any videos or audio on your site, then you might have a lot of not applicable pages for audio and video. It also breaks those violations into guidelines and rule scopes and gives you some high-level understanding of how you might rectify some of the issues that you find. So I took a video of us doing the FAE report on the Pixo website. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Let's see. So we go to forms. Form controls must have labels. I go to the home page. And then I scroll down and I see input email, no label in the rule details. Or in the element results. Then I go to the details and it'll say, hey, here are the WCAG success criteria that you're violating. And under techniques, here are some ways that you can address that. So it's a pretty comprehensive tool, and it was developed by the folks at DRES at U of I. And DRES stands for Disability Resources and Educational Services. So let's see if I can exit full screen. Looks like not today. Okay. Next tool that we have might look a little familiar because it's made by the same people that made FAE. And this one's called A-Inspector. It only works for Firefox at the moment. So make sure you're always applying those Firefox updates. Otherwise, the tool will not work for you correctly. But you'll notice we still have the category, the violations, warnings, and manual checks and passes, and the guidelines. So I found a different error on the Pixo website again, and I will show you what A-Inspector looks like on the Pixo website. Now, one of the biggest differences between FAE and A-Inspector is A-Inspector only goes one page at a time. So often the way that we use this is we'll run the site through FAE, we'll see where a violation is, and then we'll verify that violation with A-Inspector, and then try to apply the fix and see if what we want to change will actually address that issue. So it says text must exceed CCR ratio, which is color contrast ratio. And I scroll down and it puts a nice little red box with a little V in the corner to say, here's your violation. So it looks a little hard to see to me, but this is red text that says required on a dark blue background. And it's not accessible. The CCR, the color contrast ratio, was only 2.4. I'm going to see if I play that again, if it's easier to see this time. Okay, yeah, it looks a lot better for me. I don't know if it was grainy for you all, but we jump down, we see the violation, the red text on the dark blue background. And then we know that this is something we need to change because there's not enough contrast here. I'm going to pause right here. So in the selected element, you'll see here's the hexadecimal color for that foreground. Here's the hexadecimal color for that background, and your ratio is only 2.4. And being able to grab that hexadecimal color is important for the very next tool that we have. That one is called Colorable. So Colorable will check the contrast ratios for different foreground and background combinations, and it'll tell you if you pass the WCAG guidelines and for which level, A, AA, AAA, etc., and for what font size. So it has a nice interface here too for you to adjust colors. If the color combination that you have doesn't quite work, you can change the lightness of it, change the hue, change the saturation, and get a more accessible color that will work. I did another video example of, you guessed it, the Pixo website. So let's see that. So the same form that we had, I looked at, I said, that light blue on that dark blue doesn't look right. I grabbed the light blue hex color from the web inspector, and I pasted it into Colorable. And then I go back to our website and grab that dark blue color from the web inspector. Let me throw it in there, and to my surprise, we passed. It was 5.42 for AA. And WCAG AA, again, is the majority of what sites will be tested against. And the contrast needs to be 3.1 for large text and 4.5 for small text. So again, WCAG defines large text as 14 point and bold, and it describes the rest of the text is anything below 14 point. And I believe there's also a minimum size pixel that you should be able to use, but that relates to the font as well. So 11 pixels in Arial might not be the same as 11 pixels in Times New Roman. Well, Times New Roman is not a web font, so please don't use that if you're building a website. Let's see. So another tool is the bookmarklets. It's a visualization tool developed by me and the folks at Drez, who made FAE and A Inspector. It's not an evaluation tool, but it's a way to make hidden accessibility features visible. So we talked about landmarks. We have main, banner, and navigation are some of those landmarks. What the bookmarklets do is highlight those different features. So what is the bookmarklet? It's a small piece of JavaScript that runs on any browser. And you're able to drag and drop that to your bookmarks or favorites bar and activate it on any browser. So this is the landmarks bookmarklet. And then here's an example of the headings bookmarklet for the Pixo website. So oftentimes content authors will pick a heading that they think looks visually appealing, regardless of that heading order. They're like, wow, you know what? This doesn't quite look like right. I want to use an H3 because I really like that size. But then things are not in the correct order. Your heading should work like the outline of a paper, for example, that you'd write for a literature class. In this example, you can see that there are two H2s, and then nested under those H2s are some H3s. These H3s support this H2. So what do? Strategy and UX, website design and development, custom app development. Just like the HTML structure, that content structure is really important as well. This is also like landmarks. It helps the user orient themselves on your site and see how the different parts of your content relate to each other. So bookmarklets, here's how to install them. And here are the ones that are available. You go to accessibilitybookmarklets.org, and Jenna will share all of these with you. You grab the bookmarklet and drag it up to your bar, save it. And then when you go to the Pixo website or any website, you just press that bookmarklet and it will highlight the accessibility features on your site. Very
Landi,
simple.
can I interrupt you just for a moment? Because I think maybe the screenshots in your presentation might not match what's live on the Pixo website. You
Oh,
might just be
yes.
working with a different version. And I wanted to clarify that. There was someone asking in the chat about that. Can you
Oh, yeah,
confirm
yeah.
that?
Yes. This was many, many moons ago when we had these accessibility violations, and some of these I actually threw in there so that I can take these screenshots and videos. Our site is accessible, so we don't just leave our site in a bad state. But these were things that we found when rebuilding our website back in, I think, 2013. So yeah, our site is accessible now, and as the guidelines change, there will be new things that pop up. As we create new content, there might be new violations that pop up. But we do an audit once a year for most of our clients, and uh, we would address those issues as they come up so that we keep the site in compliance. This is not a one and done thing. Accessibility is a marathon. So did that answer the question? Sorry, I probably should have
It looks like
that.
it. They said thanks for the explanation, so that's great.
Makes it look like our website's really inaccessible. And they're like, should these people really be giving this talk? I get it. Okay. So another tool that we use are screen readers. So screen readers can be very specific to your operating system. This one is VoiceOver by Mac. It works on your MacBook Pro or other Apple computer. It works on your iPhones, your tablets, etc. This one is NVDA, which is a Windows specific one. This is Orca for Linux. And then this one is ChromeVox. So ChromeVox works for Chrome. So it works across different operating systems. So all of these, I believe, are free. I don't remember if Orca's free. I know NVDA is and VoiceOver is. So all of these are free tools, but you'll also have some paid versions of these tools, like JAWS for Windows. And if you are an actual user with disabilities, then using a tool like JAWS is really good because they can help guess what you're trying to do and make some smart decisions for you. So if there were problems, you can kind of bypass those issues and have a better experience. But as a tester, we want to use the free tools because we want to find as many issues as we can to fix them. So we don't have to rely on someone spending a lot of money on a tool like JAWS to have a better equitable experience. I did take another video of what a screen reader sounds like. This is specifically VoiceOver, again, on our perfectly accessible Pixo website. And keep in mind too, that this is at normal speed for me, but people who use this all the time as part of their daily, day-to-day web exploration, they listen to these at much higher speeds. And this is a voice that I like to listen to that didn't come with it, but so.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen and can be used to control the computer using only your keyboard.
And this is the default voice, but I installed a different one.
Chrome, banner, visited, link, image, Pixo, list 6 items, link, approach, link, work, link, people, link, jobs, link, contact, visited, link, blog, name, visit, other bookmarks, menu, Pixover, link, visited, link. Let's talk about your project. Main, you are currently on a link, link, multi-site platform for the U of I College of Fine and Applied Arts, link, international web platform for precision planting, link, bibliography database for ASCE, link, building with link, drawing code visited, link, behavior-driven development, link, object-oriented UX visited, link, customizing the author experience in WordPress visited, link, striking a balance between your values and your benefits, link, explore all blog posts, link, learn more about working at Pixo, link, software developer, link, introduce yourself. Hi, my name is edit text. You are currently on a text field. Starting a project because edit text, main. You are currently on edit text email. Blank. Your phone number. Menu pop up. Submit button. Group. You are current. Stop recording button. You are currently on a button.
Okay, so I wanted to show what that is. I'm only using tab in this example to go to the tabbable elements, but you can use your screen reader to start reading at the top of the page and go all the way down. I wanted to show what VoiceOver does because some of it's pretty cool. It'll say, list with 6 items. So I know, hey, there's 6 items in this navigation. Do I want to listen to all 6 of these, or do I want to skip over that and go to something else? It'll also say visited, link, blog. So you know, hey, I've been here before. And that'll help users say, I haven't been to these sections of the website, if they wanted to explore and find out more. When you get to those form elements, it'll say text. You know, text box, enter your text here. And it'll say radio with 3 group options. So it's very informative of what information it tells you. But it's not like that out of the box. It's like that because we helped make it that way. We made it a list of 6 links because we're using HTML5 semantic to make sure that the screen reader interprets that the way that we want them to. So that's an example of VoiceOver. I only use it once a testing cycle if I can, because sometimes it can get really difficult to hear them saying things over and over again. Link, visit it, link, visit it, link. And I don't know how people that need these tools can do it so quickly and so efficiently and not go crazy, because I struggle with hearing that voice over and over and over again. But it's another good way to test your site for usability. So caveats, not all testing tools are created equal. For example, some of the tools are implemented by different people, and different people will have different understandings of the WCAG rule set. Not every tool will find the same bugs, but making sure your site has no violations is a good first big step in making sure your site works for a diverse group of users. It's not also all that you can do. Remember, the goal is to make sure that your site is as accessible as possible for a wide variety of users, to make sure that they have an equitable experience. But how do you make sure that that experience is equitable? We've mentioned putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but most of us are not users with disabilities. So we can only take our best educated guess at what a good user experience would be for that group or for those people. If you've ever heard of usability testing, it's where you put your product in front of users and ask them to perform simple tasks on your site. You then record their actions and have them speak out loud so you can analyze and discover where the users are struggling. This will highlight areas of the site that need more clarity and ease of use. You can also diversify your testing by including individuals with disabilities in your test group. The more feedback, the better. If only 1 out of 3 users in the same persona group are struggling, is it because of your site or is it because of that user? It's hard to tell with so few data points. So when possible, test with many groups as much as possible. It's also could be that users just are not using the site in the way that you intended. So this is one of my favorite GIFs of a cup of water. Seems self-explanatory, but some people might really struggle with using a cup of water. So yeah, Pixo can help with a bunch of different things in regarding to accessibility. We have a team that understands Section 508 and ADA and WCAG and can help identify and fix different issues. We created that accessibility visualization tool called the bookmarklets to make it easier for people to see what their hidden accessibility features are. We've been working in the accessibility space for probably close to 15 years now, and we're constantly adapting as technology changes. So if you need information or help bringing your site to compliance, or even just testing it in the first place, we have audits, recommendations for fixes, quotes for the actual fixes, depending on what your tech stack is. If it's PHP, if it's React, if it's something that we are familiar and comfortable with, then we can do those fixes for you as well. A list of testing tools, and like you just saw, usability testing experts that can help find those holes in your site and make them better. So yeah, reach out to Danielle if you're interested in any of these services for your website. And thank you, Jordan, for having us.
Of course. Thank you so much, Landi. We don't have any questions about the actual presentation, but there is a question if the Pixo team wants to address in the chat. Obviously, you can speak better too than I can.
Yeah, Landi is asking about if we, do third-party audits for accessibility.
If we do third-party audits, like do we use third-party tools to do the audits?
It's a great question. Can Marina speak?
You are not our only attendee, unfortunately, anymore, or fortunately, I guess, too, Marina. But I think what she's asking is if, you know, she owns a business, would you be able to audit her website for accessibility? Correct me if I'm wrong, Marina.
So like if your company builds websites and that client wanted an accessibility report, would we as Pixo be able to do that audit for your company?
Well, yeah, her company is a business. Her business is
Yes.
Prairie Learn, an online assessment platform, and she knows that they need to become more accessible.
Yes, we do that.
Do those audits.
Mm-hmm. We are able to do that.
Perfect. And I'll include all of Pixo's information in the follow-up email to Marina, so that you know you can connect directly with them. She's going to type a longer question for us, so we'll hang out here. I apologize that you can't speak. It just kind of becomes messy if we start to do all that. But we can hang out.
Yeah, and even like we're thinking about this is an awareness, obviously, type this 101 webinar. If there's deeper topics, which we know accessibility goes way deeper than just this 1 hour presentation, we're exploring how to get the next level of information to people that need it. So if there are also like questions that we may not answer today, but we could answer in a future webinar that goes deeper into that, we're happy to have that put together and see if that would fall on the calendar potentially for next year.
Okay, so I see another question from Marina. If a website also adds content from users, how do people measure if a website is compliant or not? So are you saying like there might be a way for end users to submit content? Yes. So there are two types of audits that we do. We do a technical audit, which is what things in the code do we need to change? And then yes, there would be a content audit. So if you have content that are created by other people and their content is not accessible, it will still be considered not accessible. We do offer trainings for the different platforms that we build. And we use some tools that, or we have ways of enforcing accessibility. So for example, I'm not sure what platform you will use, but if your platform adds, if you can do custom fields, anytime we have an image, we would force a user to also have to enter in alt text, for example. They have other platforms that if you put headings out of order, WordPress, for example, you can go to an outline. It'll say, hey, you have an H3 here that should be an H2. Do you want to fix that? So yeah, you'll never be able to guarantee that they create accessible content. And that gets into stuff that I'm not an expert in the legal system of what that means. But the content being inaccessible will make your website inaccessible. So and if you have the ability to contact those professors to change that content, or you can audit just the platform. But again, even if the platform was accessible and the content was not, that does not mean you're compliant. But we could do audits that are just for the technical stuff and ignore the content errors. If you have access to edit the content that the professors have entered, you can make it accessible yourself as well. So I don't know, I hope that answered your question. I know it's probably not the desired response, but.
And we're always open to conversations, Marina, too, to dig in more and come up with things that are more geared towards you specifically. Obviously, we're kind of trying to talk generically as much as possible today, but we know that each project we look at is very unique and has different boundaries and constraints and that sort of thing, and happy to explore that.
We'll hang out for another minute here, Marina, in case you do have something, a follow-up question or anything you'd like to add. Oh, we did get one.
Yeah, they can, yeah.
Perfect. Well, like I said, I'll include Pixo's information in that follow-up email with all of the resources from today, the recording, everything that was shared. Hopefully you guys will all be able to connect. It sounds like you may. And like Danielle said, we're also working on sessions for 2024. We have 2 that we have ready. I just need to get them posted, so be on the lookout for those with their team. And then obviously our wide variety of SBDC webinars. So all of that will be in the follow-up email. So thank you so much, Danielle, Landi, and Jenna, for joining us today and presenting. We always appreciate it. And thank you so much for our attendees for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.